me say this simply and clearly.
That these people are fucking idiots.
Johnny, archaeology. Are we going to eventually dig everything up? Well, Johnny, I think there's still a lot of stuff to dig up out there. But that's got me thinking about a wider bloody question. What? Museums. Do we need them at all? Well, don't they show important discoveries made over the millennia? Yeah, museums. Museums, do we need them? And just what does a museum do? Well, I suppose that's a bloody point. Just why do we have a museum?
For centuries, we humans have put the stuff we value into safe houses and locked it away. Historical artifacts, precious metals, biological specimens, and some art too. This was mostly done by the powerful and privileged, those who had or stole stuff valuable enough to try to save. But they mostly kept it to themselves, and it was only pretty recently that such treasures were made available to the likes of us.
Yeah, museums come about, Johnny, back in the dusty old days of the 1700s and all that bloody stuff, when science was branching out around the world and these scientists were finding all sorts of crazy shit out there in the primitive lands, as they call them, and were bringing stuff back to show the bloody, show the civilised people. Look what's going on over in bloody Swaziland, for Christ's sake. Look what's going on over in the Congo, for Christ's sake. Have a look at these shrunken heads. And people were sticking them in these bloody museums. And people were excited about these things and would go and have a look at them at a museum.
Well, it seems every city must have one, if not several, of these public storehouses for allegedly non-functional objects. Why do we need these?
Yeah, right. And then there's all this controversy, Johnny, about how these bloody museums acquired these items over the century. Yeah. Did they go over to the native cultures around the world and just pinch the stuff? They probably did.
Collecting stuff is, and always has been, complicated. Be they trophies of war or conquest, objects of worship, exotic curiosities, or even recently completed paintings. The objects that populate our museums have been removed from their original context, wrested from the individuals and communities and civilizations that birthed them. Tracing an object's provenance or its history of ownership is murky business and the subject of many court cases, necessitating the return of cultural heritage and private property decades or even centuries after it was looted. But it's precisely these complications that make museums relevant.
So does that mean these days, Johnny, in this more woke environment, have we got to give it all back?
This scene got me wondering, what are the ethics of museum collections? And if museums founded decades or even centuries ago acquired their collections through either outright shady or less than honorable means, do they have a moral responsibility to return those stolen objects today?
I mean, half the bloody acquisitions of the bloody museums that have to go back. Oh, Johnny, I don't know about that, for Christ's sake. And do the people actually want these things back anyway?
Don't be so fucking stupid.
I mean, there's lots of controversy about the carvings from ancient Greece and all that sort of shit that the British Museum has. Yeah, that could be right. And should that go back to the appropriate authorities? I mean, what's the British Museum doing with a whole lot of fucking Greek artefacts? But Johnny, some of these things are bloody priceless. They're priceless works of art.
Easter Island sculpture that's about 1,000 years old. Or this bronze sculpture of the Hindu god Shiva.
These bloody museums, Johnny, if they gave all the bloody stuff back that was unethically bloody acquired, they'd have hardly any bloody stuff left. What would you have in museums then? What would you have in museums? If that's the case, then why have we got museums at all?
The list of disputed museum treasures keeps on growing.
Should cultural artefacts return to their home countries or be left in Western museums? The subject of intense debate as to who should now own them.
And another thing that gets my bloody blood up, Johnny, is how the archaeologists just feel they have the right to walk into ancient burial sites and just start fucking digging them up. Well, hang on, Johnny, are you saying that archaeologists going into these old burial sites are being disrespectful?
Saxon settlement. In the middle of the Saxon settlement, there appeared what we presumed to be 4 graves, and started excavating the first of those, and straight away we knew something was different about.
Yeah, do they have no bloody respect? I mean, those people, every single one of them, were put there with due respect, and yeah, I suppose it is disrespectful now you put it that way.
Art to artifacts. You might want to also check out the Central Museum in Essex, London, because it will be housing some rare artifacts uncovered from a burial site. One that's being hailed today as the UK's version of the Tomb of Tutankhamun. The grave actually discovered in this case in 2003.
Is probably the best known prehistoric monument on the island of Anglesey. Like the other prehistoric tombs on Anglesey, it was constructed to protect and pay respects to the remains of the ancestors.
Yeah, the people that obviously buried him there didn't want him disturbed. And if you said to him a couple of thousand years ago, you realise in a couple of thousand years this is all going to be dug up and fucking thrown all over the bloody paddock, and it'll all be taken off to museums and everything. I mean, would they be happy about that? I wouldn't be happy about that if my relatives in a couple of 100,000, whatever, years were just dug up because people wanted to have a look at them. Yeah, to me it's always been the height of disrespect. Yeah, just because their relatives aren't around to complain about it, Johnny, doesn't mean they should just go and do it. Does that make it ethical to just dig up dead bodies willy-nilly? And these days, Johnny, a lot of things are classed as racist.
Douglas, for the cover piece this week, you have written about the culture wars infiltrating museums. What's been happening?
Well, I start off with a description of going to the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford this past week. The Pitt Rivers Museum has always been an interesting oddity of a museum, a collection of maybe 19th century collected artifacts. And I discovered on returning this week that it's now become an oddity of our own time. The museum is filled with condemnations of the museum. The collection is filled with condemnations of the collection. Almost everything tells you about the sins of European colonialism, European racism. There are, of course, all of the nods to the religion of our time. There are segments on Beyond the Binary, because I'm sure that's what everybody wants when they go to the Pitt Rivers collection. And we see, for instance, anime characters from the 1990s who are strong queer icons. My point is that the museum is effectively abolishing itself. It's saying that the collection was put together by bad forces and it has to be saved in the modern era, reinterpreted and indeed accused. Now this, as I say in my cover piece this week, is not at all unusual. It is something that is going on collection after collection and museum after museum across the land.
And a lot of things in museums these days are bloody racist. We shouldn't have those things. Well, does that mean we just hide things from the public, kids especially, as if the thing didn't happen? Does it? Yeah, we don't want them to know about that stuff. That's racist, so hide it. Even though it's been in the museum for 200 years, take it out the back and fucking store it. Or better still, just burn it. Oh, Johnny, that sounds like bullshit, surely. Jesus Christ! I think history is history. No matter how shitty it is, it's got to be on display. I mean, the German people might eventually take offence to all the bloody Nazi shit, that the memorabilia that's hanging around the world, the Nazis, and say, we don't like that anymore, we're changed, we're different, we want to abolish that from the world's eyes. Really, Johnny, you just can't, surely you just can't bloody wipe them, can you? What do we say then? Yeah, all right, yeah, the Nazis. Yeah, they don't want to know anything about it. It's offensive to them. So we'll get rid of all the Nazi stuff and we'll never mention Nazis again. Is that what you want to happen? I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about in, say, 100 years. The German people might say, enough is enough. As if it is offensive to people in 100 years, I suppose. We've had a gutful of that. Yeah, we don't bloody associate with the Nazi regime at all, and it's very offensive to millions of Germans. Yeah, I don't know whether Nazis is such a good analogy, Johnny. It seems that you're getting way off bloody subject here. We started talking about bloody archaeology and museums. What the? Yeah, believe it or not, Johnny, I'm a bloody advocate of museums. I like them. But we have to work out in our minds what's the purpose of a museum in the first place. What are we doing with a museum? And if 3/4 of their bloody acquisitions are stuck out the back in drawers and boxes and dusty bloody shelves, what's the point of them? Oh, Johnny, you've gone down another bloody silly rabbit hole with this bloody show. When was the last time you went to a museum, Johnny? Well, just because people don't go to fucking museums doesn't mean that we shouldn't have them, surely.
I said, take it easy, baby, I worked all day and my feet feel just like lead.